welcome to the workshop. This is the roadmap for integration that I've been using for myself for the last 3 years, and I've been refining it over time. And it's a simple but powerful process I've used to anchor some of the insights I've received from psychedelic experiences into the real world and into tangible action. So I'm really happy to present that to everyone. I have a slight presentation. It's not very long to go through some basic principles of how I've built the process. So I'll share my screen. Please stop at any point for questions or comments. I'll go through the presentation and then we can jump into the process. And I have a few questions along the way for you both. Let me know if you can see my screen. Yep. So why we here, we're writing an integration roadmap, and writing an integration roadmap, as you both know already so much for being avid writers, it opens you up to the creative intelligence within us. It allows us to understand where we're at and where we want to go and imagine what's possible. The process allows us to anchor flashes of illumination from psychedelic experiences into the real world. So what this roadmap has done for me personally, the way I've used it, is I usually start my year with the process. So on January 1st, for the last 3 years, I've been sitting down and working through this roadmap to understand where I've been in the last year, like where I'm at in my life and where I'd like to go. And it's also a creative exercise for me to jot down like what's possible, like dream it a little bit bigger, and also imagine like the steps that I need to make and to take to get there. So it's a framework that's helped me get from A to B in a very planned, actionable, and also creative way. And it's not too planned, because what I do is I usually just set a day or two at the start of the year. I fill it out, and I create sacred space and time around it. And once I'm done, I don't look at it again for another year. And the reason why I do that is that I trust in the inner intelligence of the process and myself to put it out in the wind and then see where it goes. And I've been surprised and amazed really every year how closely I walk the path without having even looked at the roadmap I created at the start of the year. Like, it consistently amazes me that it's so close. And another part of that is that I feel like it's very my life is quite structured and I have a lot of things to do, and having this flowy kind of letting go process of trust like really helps me make this process really enjoyable for myself. So for me, it's a yearly roadmap. For other people, it could be like a 3-month roadmap or a 6-month roadmap, or even planning something a bit shorter. There's no specific timeline for this. So I'll go through some basic principles that I have had creating this. One of them is that your vision becomes your purpose, becomes your mission, becomes your values, becomes your actions, becomes your destiny. So starting from the high level, like having a clear vision for yourself allows you to have a purpose, which is your why you're in this world, and your mission is how you're going to achieve that purpose, which then becomes your values, which is what you care about in the way that you show up in the world, which then becomes your actions, which eventually leads to your destiny. So as we're working through a roadmap, we're going to start from the very high level to like breaking it down to the action level, which is really kind of the road that we travel as people in the world. And so having the very high level very clear at the very beginning really allows us to really dial it into the more kind of micro levels of our lives and how we're integrating our psychedelic experiences. Another one, which is a question you both know about so well, is one of the most important questions in the world, which is, who am I? And it's a question that some people meditate on for years and years and ask themselves, like, who am I? And what some people find is that the more they peel the onion, the more layers come up. And eventually some people kind of arrive at this place of, well, I'm part of the divine God consciousness, and maybe that's part of the final answer. But it's a really deep question to answer yourself and to understand better who I really am in this world. Like, what is important to me, and who am I, not only as a human, but as a spiritual being. The other question, which is very important, is what do I stand for? That is like why you're here in this planet. to do what you're doing? Like, what are the unnegotiable things that you stand for? That usually leads to your purpose statement. So what do I stand for? Duncan Grady, who's an Blackfeet Indigenous elder in the Kootenays, often talks about this question as something that his teachers and his community would ask the younger people, is like, what do you stand for? And there's this whole idea of like a spiritual warrior here that comes up, because what he talks about with this question is that soldiers often pit themselves against other people. They pit themselves against ideas. They pit themselves against different things, because that's the role of a soldier. But the warrior stands in the middle. He stands for something that is greater than himself or herself. And because of that, he's able to bring people together. And oftentimes the warrior often also upsets other people, but he stands or she stands really strongly in this belief of, what do I stand for? That's the guiding light for the spiritual warrior. So that's an important question that's part of the framework as well. And then finally, the last concept is as within, so without. It's a well-known principle, often seen as one of the universal truths, is that as we're working to clarify and to embody ourselves deeper in ourselves, then clear action and powerful action can flow from that space. So the framework allows you to clarify what's within, so that you can then clarify the actions that flow out of that. And finally, the last slide of this presentation is around the cycle of change. There's multiple versions of this. It's quite common in the business field. A lot of people have like edited it over time. This is one that was offered to me by my TCM doctor friend, Leni Newmeyer from Caslo. And that was like on our first session I did with her. She talked to me about the cycle of change, which was in her version, intention, action, and support. And at the time, I was very much in the lone wolf mindset. And to me, the word support was like, wow, that's actually the last bit of this cycle of change that I really need to work on. And ever since then, I've been adding more of that. And I added contemplation to this one for myself, because to me, the cycle of change really becomes more powerful when we start with contemplation, which then leads to clear intention, action, and then asking for support where needed. And then a big part of the cycle of change is falling back. So it's, along the way, we're not going to embody those things right away. We're going to go back to old patterns. We're going to go back to old things that don't serve us anymore. And that's okay. So a big piece of what I've learned over the last years around that part is just like having gentleness across the cycle of change, and really being gentle to myself, and not and loving the journey, really loving the questions, and loving the troubles or the difficulties, actioning all this in terms of like getting lessons out of them. So falling in love with the process. And that's all I have in terms of slides. Do you have any questions, comments, or insights to share on any of those?
I like the falling back part.
Yeah, failing forward.
It's so realistic. It's acknowledging we're vulnerable, we've got imperfections, and yeah, no exceptions to that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's failing forward is my philosophy in life. And the reason is exactly that. Like the teachings come from the mistakes. Like obviously you don't want to break everything and like make a mistake that way, but like really stress test a lot of things, and along the way be okay with like trying things, experimenting. And then as you kind of progress in that failing forward mindset, you keep narrowing down your focus and narrowing down like what works and what doesn't work for yourself. And so in some parts of my life, I'll go really wide on the failing forward and be like, okay, let's do this like crazy stuff here and then see what happens. And as I've done that more and more, like the level of like going out of the boundaries has narrowed down to like a much clearer path for myself. That's now much more narrow, much more balanced, much more clear. So I love that idea of like failing forward. Michael, you have anything to share?
Yeah, well, for me, what's coming up is the what do you stand for slide. The quality of that one caught me the most, and I think I'm just in a personal contemplation of that right now. Like, so much work in the "Who am I?" question. This grounded, practical, taking a stand for things. Like, I think I could hone in on it, but I haven't really like asked that question so much. I think that one's got a lot of value for me. So
Well, thank you, Duncan Grady, for that one. He has a lot of beautiful insights that he shares with his community, and that was one of the most powerful ones. And the idea of a soldier versus warrior too was very powerful for me to understand, like, you know, where I was acting out like a soldier in my life and where I was actually, you know, able to step into more of like a warriorship of like standing for something. And like he always asked that to young boys that come to him, and his elders as well were asking the same questions to younger boys as well that would go to them, like, what do you stand for? Consistently their first question is, what do you stand for? What do you stand for? And there's a lot of work to be done on the contemplation, like you said, around that question. So yeah, it's a beautiful insight from Duncan Grady, so thank you to him. Yeah. So I don't know if you had made if you have worked on the roadmap, if you've seen it, like where are you both in relationship to that, so I can better kind of situate where I should go with it. Because it's there's like 12 different categories and I can walk through it, or if you work through it, maybe you can share a bit around your experience, or what would be more supportive for you both?
Well, I worked through it over the last couple days, just little snippets of time that I wanted to prepare for this a bit in terms of, you know, where it might take me. So that's where I'm at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just glimpsed it a couple months ago, and I was intrigued, and then
Okay.
yeah, just I saw that this was happening today,
Cool.
last night.
Right on. Cool. So I'll go through the process. I'll go through the different sections, and along the way, I think maybe each section we can chat a little bit about what it means to you, and how would you go, how I've been going about it, and maybe share some examples, and go from there. Yeah. So the process, there's kind of like some intro text at first, which I won't really go into, except for the part like the falling in love with the process. I touched on that a little bit. And then the other one is kind of more of like around the creative process and you're both very experienced with this, but for some people who haven't quite used writing as a tool, or really a lot of creative exercises in their integration process, I'll just touch on that a little bit, is that I've done this workshop around 3 times before. And like sometimes people get hung up on this idea of like, I didn't know what to write. And one of the things I've learned from my days as a designer is that the creative process often starts with like a very high level of divergence, which is the idea of going with a convergence. Sorry, no, the divergence. Yes, I mixed up the words sometimes. Is the idea of like really writing a wide amount of different options and seeing what sticks in the end. So if you, for example, in the compass statement, you're stuck on, well, I don't know exactly the right one. Does it sound powerful enough? Like just write any amount of ideas that come to you, list them all down, and then step away for a while. Like could be days, could be weeks, even months, and then come back to it later with a fresh mind. And you'll find that it's much easier to then dial the kind of final version in a more powerful way. So the non-attachment to getting the right answer is very important. And it is much easier and much more powerful to just lay it all down, like 50 options, even if you want to, or even 5 or 3, and stepping away from it. If you don't have any ideas, just move on to the next question and come back to it another time. That's a very key part of this process, is not getting attached to the right answer. So the compass statement is really the question, who am I? And is actually the toughest question, and it's the first question. But it's also the most important, because the vision becomes the purpose, becomes the mission. So answering that question, I wasn't quite sure like what the process could be for a lot of people, but the word meditating came up to me a lot as the way to hone in on it. And it's the kind of question that it might take years to get, and it might be that you never really quite get to the final answer, which is kind of the point, is really at like digging into this question of who am I, and like I said earlier, peeling the layers of the onion and seeing like where it lands you, and then trying to formulate that into words is a key part of the process that is, for me, was quite beautiful, and my compass statement is kind heart, brave mind, fierce spirit. And to me, that encapsulates who am I in terms of my essence. And that's my version of it, and I will keep working on it. And when I do plant medicine journeys, I'm always asking that question as well during the experience. It's like, who am I? And it's taking me like interesting places, and has helped me connect with my higher self and clarify it. And from that space of kind heart, brave mind, fierce spirit, I can take clear action in the world, and I can understand better what my purpose is and what my values are and how I operate in the world. So that's been my who am I statement, my compass statement. But I'll keep working on it over time. Um, any comments on this one? That's a pretty large question. I'm curious, like Kim, how does this process go for you when you landed on this one?
Yeah, again, who am I is a very large question,
Hmm.
potentially very deep question.
Hmm.
So my tendency might be, if I wasn't pressured for time, would be just to let that question sort of sit for a while and sort of deepen the question and watch it surface in whatever way it might. And instead of doing that, because I had this workshop was coming up and it's kind of a time frame to work towards,
Hmm.
I appreciated your examples of those phrases, and I use those as a kind of um, a hook, I guess, if you will.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I came up with let go, accept all, trust, breathe.
Hmm. Nice. Nice.
And I see those as a kind of cycle, similar to the cycle of change.
I love that you're framing the compass statement as like a way of being. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, really interesting. It's a nice one too. I like the cycle. Thank you. Hmm. So I'll move on to the second one. We can go through these one by one. The purpose statement is the second principle around what do you stand for. That's a new one, Kim, from today. I hadn't added it to the roadmap, but that's a link to the presentation I just made. Is like what do you stand for? Like I touched on earlier, it's what's unnegotiable in your life. And what you stand for is kind of your warrior statement that guides all of your actions and helps you say yes when it feels right and say no when something isn't in alignment with this statement. So this idea of having something to fall back onto, to say yes or no is a powerful concept that's helped me a lot in terms of like making decisions. Psychedelic experiences open up so many different wide possibilities, but having these kind of purpose statements or just statements in general to fall back on as a source of truths are really helpful to understand like what could be powerful next steps for you that are really aligned with yourself. So again, it's this idea of like going within, so without, it's understanding really what guides your life and who you are as a person. Since it wasn't here in the process when you were working on it, I guess you don't really have an example to share. But for myself, my stand is I stand for a harmonious, connected, and thriving world. So that talks to me about my social kind of lens on things. It talks about the kind of work I want to do in the world. It talks about my mission in the world. It talks to my values as well, and it talks to how I can help guide my actions in the world. If it's not helping harmony, connection, or people thriving, especially when it comes to purpose. Like I link purpose to work, but it could also be in the way I act with my community or act with my friends or family. If it's not aligned with those things, then I should probably take a pause and think about it. Of course, it doesn't mean like when I go to the grocery and I look at the pasta options, it has to align with that. But it's more like the deeper kind of major decisions I make in my life, like especially when it comes to work and family and community. Those are like things that are really important for me. So that purpose statement helps me navigate things that maybe otherwise might be confusing or leading to potential pitfalls. So I really like having a clear purpose statement for myself. Any thoughts on that one? Even though you don't have an example ready?
Well, I guess when you mentioned going to get groceries, making a choice with regards to the kind of pasta. I think this is part of what I would put in my I stand for statement. Actually, that I consider the choices that we make in terms of our purchasing power very significant in terms
Yes.
of our impact on the world. I mean, it's something at least in most Western cultures we're doing every day and on quite a large scale if you take the collective together, and we each contribute to that scale.
I
So
agree.
I think about, my uh, move towards veganism, my journey towards veganism, which is still a journey. Right? It's not an end point, but trying to make choices that are, kind to animals in particular, and thankful to the plants, and making choices on the basis of the minimizing harm to.
I fully agree, and I'm the same as well. And I appreciate that you brought that into that. It does matter what kind of product you buy. I mean, not so much the shape, but definitely where you're buying your food comes, that where it comes from. Yeah, thank you. The next one is mantra. The mantra is a reminder that can help guide our way. It's an external action-oriented guiding prayer, and that to me is something to fall back on in everyday life in terms of coming back, repeating it, and practicing it. And it's interesting to have a guiding mantra, perhaps for a week, perhaps for a month, perhaps for a year, and really looking at ways that we can deepen how we can go with it. There's kind of like this desire in the healing space to kind of have to read all these different books, to read all these different things, to be exposed to all these different modalities, and all these possibilities which are very present in our information age. It's very easy to go really wide and get lots of different inputs. My friend David, Frank Gomes, like he has this mantra that he's been exploring for about a year now, and it's called, that's a very big thunder. And his mantra is no self, no other. And the way he practices it is that every day he like repeats it in his mind as much as possible. And in meditation, he will keep coming back to the mantra, no self, no other. And again, peel the onion and see where that takes him. And so I love the power of mantras as a powerful guidance throughout our days, and revisiting them once in a while and so like what's wanting to come up in my life right now that I'd like to explore, what is a mantra that's really connecting with me in the moment, and deepening it as much as we can. Do you have a mantra that you wrote down?
I wrote down trust and let go. I think more as you speak, I'm thinking of just notice.
Beautiful.
What are you noticing? So bringing my attention to the moment by the word notice.
Yeah, that's a lifelong journey of noticing, being present. Michael, do you have a mantra that you practice with sometimes?
Along the same lines, instead of words, though, I use images. This that an image can carry 1,000 words. So I have images I return back to numerous times a day or each day in my morning meditation that orient me towards my deeper place. But that's how I go about it. I think it serves the same purpose.
I love the idea of image. I might change this, and this is a collaborative effort. I love the idea of an image as a potential option, or even combining a mantra with an image. That's a great idea. Thank you. Yeah, I love that. Do you want to share a bit about your image? Is it like an archetype? Is it an animal or painting or art? Like, what do you typically use for an image? Does it change, or like it's something that has like been with you for years? Or
well, most of them have come out of either psychedelic journeys or Vision Quest, which is the most present for me right now. So, the most recent quest was questing sort of like what's at the core of my life, like who am I on the deepest level. So there's this stream of images, but there's sort of 5 that were most important, and there's like one that's the absolute most powerful. So that was my like orientation back to my center.
Right.
And then out of that, track what emotions are arising or what somatic experience or what thoughts or what inspiration for worldly action.
Hmm.
But just like bringing up the image seems to be the doorway into how to live it into the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. There was one psilocybin experience where I felt like there was a mask that was put on my head, as kind of a warrior of some sorts, and that image just stayed with me as like basically my purpose statement, like what do I stand for, has been that mask of like being kind of like crowned as myself, really, in terms of like being a warrior for something that I care for. And um the colors as well, the color has a lot of like blue and green are my kind of spiritual colors. I don't know what to call them, but yeah, the visuals, yeah, thanks for bringing that. I will definitely add a visual aspect to this process. I think I love that. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, very powerful meanings. um so the next one is touchstone word. I started using this one this year, which is kind of like just the simplicity of a single word that I want this year to be about. And for me, it's the word alive. And so I want to inject that word um, as a guiding force and a reminder of the mission along the way for this year personally. And how can I bring that more of it in your life? So to me, the word alive to me meant more energy. It meant more movement. It meant more clear action. It also meant embodying some of the uh, lessons I've been working with the Jaguar archetype around movement, efficiency, and then fierceness of action when the time comes to actually move that way. So, and then going out in nature more often, playing with my son more often, all those things surround the word alive. And so to me, that was my touchstone word. And I come back to it, maybe every month or so, and really, see where I'm at with that. And again, it helps me with decision making. Like, is this making me feel more alive? Like, am I feeling really passionate about it? So the word alive kind of coats a lot of my decisions this year. And so, yeah, that's my touchstone word. Kim, did you have one that you'd like to share?
I have three words: relate and community.
Hmm.
It's just, yeah, consistent with where I wish to go. And yeah, I tend to not necessarily participate as fully as I might. I tend to hold back. So it's encouraging myself to just relate, just notice that process.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks for doing that too. Like, I always like to say, you come for the medicine and stay for the community, because that relating is like so much of a big part of the healing process, and embodying ourselves better. Like, the mirroring that we get from other people is so powerful. I find I've been really enjoying kind of that aspect of my work for the last 3 years. I used to be very much a lone wolf, and now I'm really a community wolf, and I really enjoy like just connecting with people and seeing, uh, understanding my journey through theirs. So yeah, thanks for participating like that. The next one is the team. So as we're moving from the vision now down to more of the action level, and from the touchstone word, which is kind of an umbrella word for the year, we're starting to look at teams to explore, which are smaller umbrellas for like the next steps that we can explore. The themes to explore are sometimes things that are really present for you in your life. Like, you want to engage more with the community. So that could be one of the themes to explore. But there's other things that are sometimes on the boundaries or the edges of possibility in this current time, that you're kind of feeling into potential ways or potential avenues to discover this year. For example, when I started this process for myself this year, engaging with community was like very clear. Deepening my spiritual practices was very clear. Deep listening as well. But there were other teams in my awareness that I wasn't quite fully sure that they were things that were really next for me, but I put them in there as well because I could kind of sense, especially through psychedelic journeys, that they were in the boundaries of like what's possible. And I bring them in as teams to explore, to really feel them out and see like if they are things that that is kind of calling forth for myself this year. And next year they might become inspirations for something else to develop. So that's been the process I've used for the teams to explore. Did you want to share one of them, Kim, or?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah. Sorry.
You don't have to. It's totally optional.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. My dog's in the background there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My dogs are an ongoing theme to explore. Joey, I'm just gonna let you continue.
Okay, cool. I'll continue. Michael, what's one theme that you're exploring this year that you'd like to share? Oh, Michael's not here. Okay, I'll keep going. So the next step of our journey is the contemplation journey. And contemplation is the start of the cycle of change. So we're getting into the cycle of change now. Of course, the previous parts were also part of it, but now we're getting into that cycle of the continuum of the cycle of change, which is contemplation, intention, action, and then support. So we're going to flow through those things. And the contemplation process is always like a very wide start to the process. It's always a place where there's a lot of creative ideas that can flow from. There's a lot of potential writing. There's a lot of various questions that we use to basically linger on and contemplate over potential days and months. When I go through this process at the start of the year, personally, I try to write a little bit more intuitively, and I try to write a little bit more in flow. And so I spend a couple of minutes per question and try to write from a space of intuition and kind of flow with it and see what comes out. So I'm not trying to overanalyze it, overthink it. I'm not trying to spend many hours on each question, but there's definitely a way to do this in that way as well, of just really simmering on the questions for a long time, coming back to them and really writing a lot about them. There's a lot of like room to explore here and see where it takes you. And the intention here is to remain open to not knowing, maybe even saying, I don't know, and then experimenting with relaxing into this not knowing. In this moment, it might be an accurate statement for how things are for you, and that's all right. And maybe it's not an accurate statement, and that's also all right. So the idea is really to love the question, like explore it, keep deepening your understanding of it, and not having the answer right away is completely fine. You can always come back to it later. So these are all suggestions of different questions. I've been told that some of them were questions that some people have never explored in their life before. The classic one is, where do you want to be in 30 years' time? When I first answered that question, I was like, wow, where do I want to be? Like, who do I want to be when I'm like 75 years old? I've never even thought about that. So it made me think about where am I going to be when I'm an old man? And like, how do I want to be surrounded at that age? Like, where do I want to be? Like, what do I want to be doing? Who's with me? Like, what's around me even? Like, what is the environment I want to be in 30 years' time? So all these questions are ways to really go wide and explore like your future really, and where you're at right now, and how do you want to inject more play, inject more rest, what brings you the most joy. So all those are contemplative questions. Feel free to add your own. Feel free to not answer all of them. It's really up to you. So you might have some questions in there that you'd like to explore and some others not, and that's totally fine. Anything to add about contemplation? Kim, I know you seem like a very contemplative type of person, which spends a fair bit of time contemplating. What's contemplation mean to you?
I think it means just looking at my thoughts and feelings and whatever comes up for me,
including the dog. Yeah,
including the dog. You gotta wonder. You gotta wonder.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where I was last year. Was wondering, wandering, and trying to hold. We just moved here at the end of 2020 and in the middle of COVID, and yeah, it was an awkward move, but wandered around and managed to connect with various different groups, including Nectara, which I'm grateful for. So yeah.
Great.
So just, yeah, ongoing contemplation of the process of life. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sharing. Michael, what's your relationship to contemplation? As someone who does a lot of wilderness guiding, you're probably spending a lot of time because nothing better to contemplate on than with nature.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my reflection on the word is, I think it has a root of something like a place of worship, like a place to go and be with something sacred.
Hmm.
So yeah, I guess for me, it's like really, like these questions are a great example of a place to go and like be with for a while and like honor the depth of it.
Hmm.
Which feels very distinct from meditation somehow. It's just
Hmm.
like, coming with the object and really sitting with the particular object for a while.
Yeah.
Um, I spend a fair amount of time contemplating.
Hmm.
For sure. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Love contemplating as well. I'm a big contemplator. Yeah. Thanks for like noting the difference between contemplation, meditation. That's nice. I do like the idea of a sacred contemplation is like really creating sacred time around contemplating. And for me, like the best way I can think of for myself for contemplating is just going to in nature, like walking in the forest. Like to me is the most powerful contemplation tool I've had, or even just isolating myself with music has been a deep contemplative process for me to, basically move the feeling and thoughts and emotions out of the mind and into more of like the spirit and the heart of things. So yeah, these are questions to explore for yourself. And the contemplation process is the first part of the cycle. And of course, at the end of the cycle, we come back to it and reorient ourselves to these questions and maybe others that have come up along the way. And we start a cycle again, which goes into intention. I've obviously intention is the priorities, and I put the year because I use it for the year, but it could be for the future ahead. Um, and I put the rest of distractions, and it might be more for me than for everyone, but I tend to have very wide kind of range of things that I would like to do. And this idea of just having 5 priorities for each of these categories has been powerful for me because otherwise I might get off tangent, I might get off the path, I might not focus enough on the priorities. So I always try to have 5 for each different categories, and really focus on them and really dive deep into them and not kind of skim over the surface, as much as I have in the past, where I would have like 20 different intentions for the year, and that would kind of lead me astray. So the categories I've used are personal, so the inner world, and then the purpose, the external actions, and then the relationships, which is the interrelational aspects. You can craft these sections any way you like. It can be spiritual, it can be health, it can be wellness, it could be community. Those are just examples. Um, and I started the intention by I will, and not like something like I plan to, or I am planning to. Like the word I will is much more to me indicative of a commitment and a knowing or a trust that these things will flow in the right way. And at the same time, not be fully attached to this idea that it needs to happen exactly that way. Life is not linear. Life is very curvy, and might take us to different places along the year or the future that you're planning in different ways that might not fully align with the intentions. But the intention is the seed planted that can help guide the way. So non-attachment and gentleness is always key with these processes. And then we're landing on the action part, which I've done a lot of planning around actions with my intentions. I'm a big fan of landing the plane, as they call it. So I really like to be as precise as I can with them. Um, and again, not being too attached in how it actually will unfold, but like ideas of ways to implement them into your life. So if I have an intention to act in a way that's more alive this year, I might have 5 different actions here in the personal section to indicate how we'll actually do that in my real life. So it could be, having a better practice in the morning for activating my energy. It could be I will go out in nature more often, like 3 times a month or something. And I try to be as specific as I can because it really starts anchoring them into my psyche, and also clarifying how I actually can embody and put these intentions into action in a clear and embodied and organized way. And so I try to list every intention, and I would list the action pieces that go with each one of them. And having those in mind, and especially the process of writing them, allows me to really feel much clearer how I can action the intention. So it's not a piece of pie in the sky. It really is like, how am I actually going to do that in a very real way? So that's helped me really bridge the two, intention into action. And again, for me personally, I don't check this list throughout the year, but I do check at the end of the year to see how I did, and gauge myself around where should my intentions be next year, and like how did I do with my action intentions, and see where I can adjust next year to either push myself more or push myself less, or like have more reasonable expectations around what's possible, or even push myself more in some areas. So that's been really useful to look back on these after the year and see like, how did I actually put these things into action? um Michael and Kim, I'm curious, do you have a process around bridging intention into action? Are you someone that like writes about these things, or you kind of set intentions and let them go in the wind, as they say? Or like, what's your planning process? Or maybe you don't have any.
I do a fair amount of writing about it. I sort of have a self-judgment that I'm not very great at following through. Like I'll get clear and specific, but then so many other things come up, and then I'll look back later and be like, oh, I forgot to do these 9 things. So what's working for me lately is I need to put things in my calendar right away. Like if I set any to-do thing, like it has to end up on my calendar,
Mhm.
and then like actually creating space for it. So yeah, I'm curious, like it sounds like it works really well for you just to like write it down and then leave it.
Mhm.
And my experience is like that doesn't work so good for me because somehow I drop it, or I take on too many things maybe.
Yeah.
So I think there's big value in what you're saying about like coming back to this process year after year, or at some time period,
Mhm.
using that to refine the process next time.
Yeah, because there's a lot of energy around, like, and I hear it so often, and it's been the case for me, and like different workplaces I've been through, like almost everyone has some sort of project management or like task management or like action management challenges. And why? Is because it's tough, it's challenging, and having a system in place, like for some people it doesn't work at all, and some people it really works well. And so these are, especially when it comes to psychedelic insights and intention being bridged into the real world, like sometimes they're like big complex things that we're looking to embody and to change in our lives, that maybe are old patterns that were there for a long time. And I do find that writing about it without being um, attached and having this energy of like, I need to check the box at some point, like has been really good for me personally, because my logical side just wants to like check back every week and check the boxes and make sure I'm doing it. But I was trying that the first few years, and I was finding it very challenging for me, because I would beat myself up if I wasn't following up on everything I had intention around. So the gentle process has really like helped me put in the right energy and have the right relationship to this process, that has been allowing me to actually check more of the boxes, actually, because I approach it with a more softer approach. And that's really helped me to bring myself more into the heart and less into the mind of checking the boxes all the time. So for me, that's been helpful. Just approach it that way.
I apologize. I need to step away for the dogs. Get the noise dealt with.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, um, yeah. But thank you for this, Pascal. This is really helpful. The action piece that been talking about, and just the sort of the tone of gentle, gentle, kind, self-respectful, understanding of, okay, I'm in a cycle here, I'm in a process, and yeah, I might need to write some things down.
Mhm.
Some other things I might not need to write down, and I can just intuit them. And I think it depends on, I guess, how much you need to be heart oriented or mind oriented. And I thought as you were talking there about the word balance, and how I like to keep that intuition in my transition between my priorities, my intentions, and my actions. I like to intuit quite a bit, but I find if I do that too much, then I may be creating a lot, but I'm not actually getting a lot done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of paradoxically.
Yeah, it's a beautiful insight there around the balance between flow and planning. And I would say even like the word control comes to mind. You know, the word control versus trust. Like there's something for me personally that's been a big part of my journey is just trusting more, and that not trusting myself, but also trusting the process, but also trusting others in creating, like in collaborations. Because my upbringing was, you know, my dad was in the army, was very rigid and like structured, and everything needs to be planned. You know, like he worked in logistics too. So like logistic and army, can you imagine? That's like the ultimate planner and person who like, you know, plans everything ahead. So like that was my upbringing. So I've had to do a lot of work on the softer intuitive part and really trust that it does take the flow moves in the right ways that it should. And I'm still working on some of that, but it's been a beautiful process of adding more gentleness and more of the kind of creative essence behind things, and not so much like having to have it all figured out and checking the boxes. So yeah, thanks for bringing that word balance out. I think that I will write a little bit around that to add to the roadmap here to help inspire some others around that topic. Yeah, thanks.
I think, could I add something else?
Of course, yeah.
Just as an just two examples. It's like the personal priority is I will exercise. Like I can calendar that in quite easily. It's a concrete thing, right? That I could calendar in. But if I go, a personal priority also is I will love others and myself the very best I can.
Yeah.
You can't put that in a calendar and say I'm going to do that at a particular moment in time. Other, for me, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Love is this. I don't know. It's sort of nebulous, yet it is concrete in a biological sense. It can be very concrete in terms of our physiological responses. But again, I can't put that in a calendar.
But this abstract, like it's not as abstract, but it's like more kind of emotional, spiritual, based kind of like action could coat everything you're doing throughout the year. So that would be a beautiful thing to add in your action list. It's just this beautiful action of loving. And then that leave it and be there. And that can help in the psyche. I believe that in the background, like that intention becomes a background process almost of like influencing everything you're doing. So I love that. I'll add that in there as well to like, give some different types of action. It can be like, you mentioned the word nebulous or not something you put in a calendar. That's a very valid action as well. Like, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Cool. We're almost done. The last part is the support part. To me, that was the biggest piece of my journey that I feel like I was missing, when I started. And of course, is, how are you going to be supported in your action and intentions, and who are people or communities or places you haven't fully tapped into yet. So the cycle of change invariably leads to relapse, doubt, and fear. And community support is key, in my opinion, to meaningful and sustainable manifestations. So examples of support resources could be men and women's groups, your family, friends, guides, communities, courses. It can be your dog, or multiple dogs. We used to have 3 dogs, so I love dogs. So those can be, pets. So that those are examples of support. And I feel like there's a lot of this in the field, especially with men, about not asking for help, not asking for support. And it was when I moved to the Kootenays with a more tighter knit community and like a smaller amount of people that I understood the power of community and support and learn how to ask for help really. And that's been very helpful. I'm very privileged to have like very close friends that we're very close to, and we can ask them for support, like emotional, spiritual, logistical, those type of things. So I feel well supported, and at the same time, this idea of asking for help has also been like an ancestral thing that myself and others are working through, and it's for women and men and everything, and other people as well. And that's been a big part of my challenge, is asking for support. So that to me has been helpful, is just listing down the areas of support that I can have for myself. Like it could be almost anything, but for myself, like community has been really helpful. So a lot of the times when I would fill this out, it would be like specific friends or like groups that I'm a part of, or different events that are held every year that are big support for me. And then as well, like people more closer to me, like my wife and my son, like how do I get support from them, and how can I offer pieces of myself as well to support them. So I write about that as well, how it can help support others, because when you do that, then you get more support when you need it. So what's your relationship to support, Michael and Kim? Would like to share?
Michael?
Yeah. I feel like I've got a lot of support. I kind of like the idea of creating an ecosystem that supports the thriving of everything in it, and like
Mm-hmm.
being part of that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like I've got a men's group. I have like a queer support. I've got my therapist. I have got my like eco psychology coach, got my business coach. Then
Mm-hmm.
different friends on like different levels of intimacy that all have like different levels of needs. So I feel like there's a really rich ecosystem where like
Mm-hmm.
different parts can be supported.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's important because in the past, like I'd only had one or two types of support, and my life was sort of lopsided. But like as it's got more balanced out, then it's really made a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I added the word places in the list of potential support. Like a resource could be like a nice trail that you love to go to every morning. That could be a resource. Yeah. I love listing those down, because there's a tendency, and that's been my journey anyway, the tendency of like feeling like you're on your own. But then we actually start listing down all the support that you may have. And I'm privileged to have in different areas of support in my life. When I've listed it down, I've felt much more resource, and those are things that I can come back to every day. And I actually do, like, one of my practice when I wake up in the morning is just a gratitude prayer and saying thank you to my friends and community and my guides and my higher self and the earth, and like those kind of things that really help me start the day in a very supported way. And when I'm going through challenging times, then I can, even if I'm not asking directly for help from someone, I can just feel that support, imagine that support being there and knowing that it's there. And that's been really helpful. So writing about that anchors those things more into my system. So that's been a big part of my support system. So that's the process. That's the framework for the blueprint, the road mapping. Is there any questions, thoughts, feedback, comments, stories, anything that you'd like to share before we close? And I hope this was useful for both of you.
Yeah, really, really useful. I think the part about writing that you just reflected upon is writing as a support. For me, that it's been critical. It's just this creative process involved in writing. It's just, I don't know where I would be without that, in terms of reflections. And that my present integration with the psychedelic community, for example, as it's just beginning, or I should say re-beginning, because I had some affiliation with it back when I was in my early 20s. That was quite different in quality to the affiliation I have now.
Yeah.
Much more planful, and just there's organizations one can join, and it's I can write, I can be open about my experiences in a way that I never could when there was so much war on drugs and all of that. It was oppressed, right?
Yeah.
Things have changed, thankfully, in a
Yeah.
positive direction here.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you to everyone who's ever been contributing to that movement at the end, that war on drugs, and moving us forward. Yeah, thank a lot of gratitude for that. Yeah, things have changed a little bit. Yeah.
And that's supportive, right? Cultural context,
Mm-hmm.
the way it's shifting is supportive in
Mm-hmm.
many ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I think this is a great tool. And I like your deep frame work with it of the cycle of change and also working through these different layers of like purpose, mission, action.
Mm-hmm.
Like having those two pieces integrated seems really useful, and also the cycle of like coming back to it over time. Yeah, it seems pretty solid, and it seems like it could integrate with a bunch of other parts that are going on in Nectara in different ways too. That like a bunch of the other support that you're creating could filter into it in a really valuable way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I'll keep expanding on it, and I actually want to do a program on it, like a deeper dive for people to help with their blueprint and personal DNA. I think it's a very key part of the integration process, is just having this kind of blueprint, or at the very least, the basic foundational pieces of vision, purpose, values, guiding principles, those type of things are like super key for everyone, because you can always fall back on them and orient yourself through life with them. It's a essential truth that can help people guide their way. And thank you so much for joining and your questions and participation, and looking forward to more interactions with you both.
Totally.